and Jordan, and we will be your hosts tonight. Gathered on our stage are eminent people who have worked hard to make a difference in our world. This evening you may hear from scientists, artists, authors, and historical figures.
Our eminent guests have been preparing for this evening for quite a long time. They have prepared biodals, made projects, and dressed in character. So please take a moment, locate your phone, and be sure it isn't silent. Thank you.
You will get to play a guessing game tonight. On your program, there are the names of the 4th grade participants in the KEY program. After each student reads their bio riddle, write the name of the eminent person you think they are pretending to be. We will give you the answers later. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Ellie?
I left school when I was 17 years old, and I didn't go to college. I became a traveling salesperson for a big company. Later, when I was 19 years old, I started a natural gas company. I met with other owners of natural gas companies. We decided to join together to make one company. I was chosen to be the company president. In 1880, my father opened an office in New York City. In 1885, he retired. My cousin Harold Smith and I took over the family business. We changed the name of our company to Ingham Smith. Our company made different things. We made a new black color. It was used to make black car tires. In the 1800s, Harold and I started selling school supplies. In 1886, I married a teacher named Dallas Steele. I built a house in Sound Beach for us to live in. Alice and I had 4 kids. We named them Dorothy, Helen, Mary, and Junior. In 1990, Harold and I bought a mill in eastern Pennsylvania. We began making slate pencils. School teachers did not like the blackboard chalk they had to use. Harold and I decided to make better chalk. In the early 1900s, a company invented a black crayon that did not run off. We called it the stationary carbon black crayon. Alice told me that school children needed good crayons. In 1903, my company invented colored wax crayons that would be easier for children to use. Alice made up the word Crayola for a box of 8 Crayola crayons. Soon, schools all over the United States began buying Crayola crayons. We started making boxes of 60 crayons. These cost 10 cents. In 1904, in the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, my dustless chalk won a gold medal for being a great new invention. Benches. In 1913, I built a winter home in Florida. In Florida, I had an orange tree. Corn is only orange to ships, so I built a corn on the Indian River, so ships could pick up all the food. When my children grew up, they worked at a factory. During the Great Depression, many people in the United States lost their jobs. My workers kept their jobs by working 4 days a week instead of 5. I leave my farmers work packing gardens. All my life, I loved gardens. When I was older, I bought some land in Greenwich, Connecticut. I hired a gardener to plant trees and flowers. I had a pond and 3 baseball fields. In 1927, Alice and I took a trip around the world. In 1934, I visited my grandson in Florida. On the way back home, I had a hard time knowing who I wanted. In 1963, I sent 5 divers to live in an underwater house as an experiment. I found people need sunlight to live. I was born in France on June 11, 1910. When I was little, I was weak and had stomach problems. At the age of 4, I taught myself how to swim. When I got older, I had many jobs. I was a military leader, photographer, scuba diver, inventor, researcher, filmmaker, scientist, underwater explorer, documentary host, and conducted underwater expeditions, made television series. In 1936, I became a French naval officer. I dressed up as the enemy, I took pictures of their secret papers, and then brought them back to my base. For my actions, I received France's highest award, the Legion of Honor. I got married to Simone Melchior and had 3 sons and 1 daughter.
In 1943, I invented the aqualung with Emily Gagnon. The aqualung is a device that people use to help them breathe underwater. I also invented the waterproof camera. I founded the French Navy Research Group in 1945. In 1953, I wrote a book called The Silent World. 10 years later, I sent those 5 divers down in underwater houses to live as the experiment. I sent 5 divers down 2 more times. In 1973, I founded a society to raise awareness to help save the underwater world. In fact, it is still active. My son Philip died in a plane crash in 1970, I wrote The Shark. I also wrote Dolphins in 1975, The Ocean World in 1985. In 1990, my wife Simone died. In 1991, I got married again to Francine Triplet. In 1996, the Calaspo sank in Singapore Harbor. They are still trying to restore it. In 1997, I died of a heart attack. Who am I?
Jordan.
Do you know who the fastest woman in the world is? I know, because it's me. I was born in Clarksville, Tennessee in 1940, just weighing over 4 pounds. No one expected such a tiny girl to have a first birthday, but I did. I had 19 older brothers and sisters, a mom who knew home remedies, and I had a father who worked several jobs. As a child, I loved to run and jump, but I couldn't do that as much as a child because I was very sick. If one of my siblings ever got a cold, I would get double pneumonia. If one of my siblings had measles, I would get measles too, plus mumps and chickenpox. My mother nursed me at home. Doctors were a luxury for my family. Only one doctor in Clarksville would treat colored people. Before I turned 5, I got sicker than ever. During that sickness, my left leg twisted inward, and I couldn't move it back. Not even my own mother knew what was wrong. Besides scarlet fever, the doctor said I was also stricken with polio. In those days, most children who were stricken with polio either died or were permanently crippled. I remembered the doctor telling me there was no cure. The news spread around Clarksville saying that lively girl would never walk again. I kept moving by hopping on one foot. I could get myself around the house, the outhouse, and in the backyard. I also was able to get myself to church on Sundays. Twice every week, my mother and I went to the nearest hospital that would treat colored patients. Some hospitals were 55 miles away. Doctors and nurses helped me do exercises to make my paralyzed leg stronger. I practiced the exercises constantly at home, even when it really hurt. What hurt to me the most was that the local school wouldn't let me go to school because I couldn't walk. Every day, tearful and lonely, I watched my brothers and sisters go off to school each day. I thought to myself, there must be a way to fight back. I fought back, and by age 10, I was able to walk again. By the time I turned 16, I was a track star, and I ran in the 1956 Olympics, and I won a bronze medal. In the 1960 Olympics, I won 3 gold medals. I was the first American woman who ever won 3 gold medals at the Olympics. 3 years later, I graduated college and then married Robert Elbridge. We had 4 children together. In 1981, I started a group to help young athletes. I taught them to work hard like I did. Who am I?
I like Coke and spray on cheese. When I was born in Seattle, Washington on October 28, 1955. I was active as a child. When I was 3, I liked to go on a rocking horse. When I was 7, I read an encyclopedia from A to Z. My mom and dad entered me into a contest at church. I had to memorize the 17-page long Sermon on the Mount to have dinner at the restaurant on the Space Needle. I won the contest. I like to water ski, swim in the summer, and ice skate and downhill ski in the winter. In the summer, I went to the Hook Canal, and we had a miniature Olympic teams, and everybody always wanted me on their team because I was smart and used big words, and I was good at sports too. In 6th grade, I lost interest in school. My parents saw that and sent me to a private school called Lakeside. A teacher took me, Paula, and some others to the computer room. PCs didn't exist and computers cost millions of dollars. Not even Lakeside could afford it, so they had the next best thing, a teletype machine. I liked it a lot. Sometimes I snuck out of my house and used it. A couple of kids formed a computer club that other members and I wrote programs. I did the program tic-tac-toe. Sometimes I got kicked out of the group, but not for long. They couldn't figure something out, so I was able to rejoin the group. In 1973, I graduated from Lakeside. I was accepted to Harvard. 2 years later, I dropped out of school to work with Paula on the computers. In 1975, a hardware computer came out. It was called the Altar 8800. The Altar wasn't the world's first microcomputer, but it cost less than $400. After you finish building it, you only have the hardware part, not any software. After a long time, you're ready to show Ed Roberts our first microcomputer. When we got to try it out, Paul typed 2 + 2. Instantly, the computer shot back 4. Now we had to deal with MITS. Paul and I had to come up with a name for our company. We decided on Microsoft for the name of our company. Microsoft offered a contract with IBM. IBM is a computer company for big computers then. When Microsoft had a meeting with IBM, I wasn't taking it seriously because I looked too young. When they saw how much I knew about computers, they signed a contract for operating system. Operating system is like a car all fueled up, but with no driver. In 1981, the first personal computer came out. Every PC was run by MS-DOS. MS stands for Microsoft, D stands for disk, and OS stands for operating system. In 1985, Microsoft came out with Windows. What made it really different was the mouse. You can click on pictures and icons on the computer screen. The reason why they called the software Windows was because you can have more than one screen running at one time. Melinda French worked at Microsoft. When I talked to her, I could tell she was smart, independent, and fun. Everyone thought we were a good match for each other. On New Year's Day, I got married to Melinda in Hawaii. Our wedding was world news, but we wanted to have privacy. I started to build a 55,000 square foot house before we got engaged. The next year, our first child was born. We named her Jennifer Catherine. 3 years later, I had a son named Ronnie John. In 2002, we had our third child named Phoebe Adele. A gigantic mansion was built on a lake. To save energy and keep the house safe from earthquakes, it was built on a hillside. The house had pins you put on your shirt, so when you walked into any room, it will change colors and pictures and art to how you like it. In 1995, we launched the first Microsoft's internet browser. It was called Internet Explorer. Apple thought it was too much like their internet browser, so I had to go to court. The judge said for Microsoft to split into 2, one for operating systems and one for software development company. The court process took 2 years to make a decision. The decision was we could keep Internet Explorer the same, and Microsoft didn't have to split up into 2 groups. When I retired, I made a foundation. The foundation helps sick and starving kids and their families so they can get better by giving them medicine and food. I think my company has changed the world. Who am I?
Theopractus is my best friend. No, he's not a human. He's a stuffed dog my mother gave to me when I was born March 2nd, 1904. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts with my mother, father, and sister Marnie.
My parents did not have a lot of money, but managed to pull enough together to allow me to attend Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. The next part of my life story is to be that I was a great academic student at the prestigious Dartmouth College, but I didn't turn out that way. I was a horrible student, and I got terrible grades. I lied to my parents and told them I was transferring to Oxford because I had won a contest, which was, of course, a lie. I eventually confessed to my parents, and to my surprise, they still allowed me to go. Once again, I didn't really fit in. I doodled all day. I met a lovely woman named Helen. She was impressed by my drawing and said I should consider becoming an artist. Illustrator. That comment changed my life. I eventually proposed to Helen, and she said yes, but we could not get married yet. She went on to be a teacher in New Jersey, and I was still trying to figure out how to make a living as an illustrator. Finally, one day I got a call from a magazine called the Saturday Evening Post, and they wanted to publish my cartoon. It was one of two tourists sitting on camel, imagining they were brave explorers. After that, I went on a roll. I landed a job at a humor magazine called The Judge, and I was finally able to marry my sweetheart, Helen, on November 29, 1927. Helen and I went on a trip to Europe in 1936. I kept doing things like a boring horse and a wagon. That trip was also where I got my idea for my first book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. It got rejected many times, but finally I was able to get it published. A few years after that, I was signed by Random House, and they agreed to publish anything I wrote. I soon wrote the book Horton Hatches the Egg. Helen came up with the elephant bird ending. It soon became incredibly hard for me to write because the war had broken out in Europe. After the war, I went back to writing children's books. After a trip to Japan with Helen, I wrote Horton Hears a Hoot. I also decided I need to go back to Dartmouth and get the education I had once left behind. I went back, graduated, and received my doctorate degree. Soon after that, an article came out about how children were having trouble reading. Random House and Houghton Mifflin teamed up to sell books. They challenged me to write a book that included 225 words. It was difficult, but I did, and the end product was The Cat in the Hat. It became a hit and sold 1 million copies. Over the next 10 years, I wrote 12 books including The Cat in the Hat, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, Euro the Turtle, and The Sneetches. In 1984, I released The Butter Battle book. It was the only children's book to stay on the adult bestseller for 6 months. That year, I won a Pulitzer Prize Award. It had never been given to a children's writer before. In 1990, I published Oh the Places You'll Go, which summed up the view of my own life. I soon realized this would be my last book. On September 24th, 1991, I died at the age 87. Who am I?
I was a ballerina. I was famous because I was the first Native American to break into ballet. I was born on January 24th, 1925 in Fairfax, Oklahoma. I'm a Native American full-blooded also. I grew up in Los Angeles studying ballet for many years.
Spirit gave us this country as a home. You had yours. We did not interfere with you. We do not want your civilization. I was born in 1842 near the Black Hills on the western edge of South Dakota. This was sacred Dakota land. As a child, I was called Curly because I had light brown wavy hair. My tribe moved to be near the buffalo herds. When we killed a buffalo, we used every part of it. My father was a holy man, and my mother's name was Rattle Blanket Woman. As I grew up, we saw more and more white people settling near Lakota land. The white men asked the Great Father, their president, to protect them on their journey west. The Great Father sent soldier chiefs to talk to our people. These men did not understand the Lakota way of life, and this caused many conflicts between my people and the white men. I got a horse when I was 10. I loved my horse and spent a lot of time with it. During battles, I would pick up wounded warriors and bring them to safety. I was a good rider because I practiced a lot. I was often quiet and thoughtful, unlike the other boys in the village. By listening to the elders' stories, I learned about the tribe's history. I had an older friend named Ty Blackbone who I called Hump. Hump taught me important warrior techniques and battling skills. In 1854, I was visiting relatives at Brule Camp. While one of the leaders of the camp was negotiating with white soldiers, he was shot in the back. Unsure what to do, I waited for Wakantanka to send me a vision. During my vision quest, I did not eat or sleep for 2 days. When I reached my horse, I fainted and had a vision of a warrior on horseback. When I told my dad about this vision, he asked me if the warrior spoke to me. I said no, but I knew what the warrior was feeling. My dad told me that this meant that the warrior was me. My dad said, "You will be a leader of your people and a great warrior among them." Early in September 1855, I left our camp along with 4 young Lakota boys to find wild horses. I caught a strong young horse. When we returned, we noticed a cloud of smoke rising from the area of the village. As I neared the village, the smell of burnt gunpowder grew strong. I noticed hoof imprints on the ground and moccasin tracks between them, and I knew that the soldiers must have taken many women and children captive. Smoke rose off the teepees, filling the air with a thick fog. I saw many dead warriors, women, and children lying on the ground throughout the village. The sight made me sick to my stomach. When I was 15, I went on a war party against the Snake Indians. I was still a young warrior among the other Dakota men. I did not feel old enough to fight by myself. Suddenly, my horse became wounded and fell. As the horse was falling, I jumped onto another loose horse and charged the enemy lines. I took out an arrow and shot and killed a snake warrior. Back at the Lakota camp, people celebrated the victory. They talked about my bravery and the women sang songs in my honor. My father was very proud of me. In 1862, the U.S. opened up the Bondsman Trail. This trail passed through the Lakota land. I was among the young warriors who attacked the travelers that used the trail. In December, I led a successful decoy party. The soldiers followed us over a ridge where more than 1,000 of Chief Red Cloud's warriors were hidden, waiting to attack. All 80 soldiers died in that battle. Later, the U.S. government abandoned the forts along the Bondsman Trail. By 1876, I was the leader of many Lakota villages. As more soldiers attacked small, peaceful villages, additional camps fled to join me. In June, many other tribes also joined my camp along the Little Bighorn River. The Great Father sent soldiers into Lakota land to force us onto agencies where the soldiers could watch us. We didn't want to live on the agencies. We had watched many other American Indians go to these reservations. Later in June, scouts rode up to my camp. "Soldiers are coming," they called. Our warriors met the soldiers on the grassy hills near the Little Bighorn River. Our warriors completely wiped out one group of soldiers, including Chief Custom. and drove back the soldiers until they fully retreated. The villagers set a line of prairie grass on fire. The smoke rose up into the air, creating a wall that the soldiers could not see through. Behind the curtain of smoke, my people moved the camp away from the Little Bighorn River. I tried to keep my people free to live on their land of the ancestors, but sometimes the hunters were not able to kill enough buffalo to feed to the villages. Early in May 1877, I took my people to the Spotted Trail Agency for food. I lived there for 4 months. A white commander heard a rumor that I was going to kill the soldier chief. This commander told soldiers to take me to the guardhouse. When I saw the barred windows of the guardhouse, I realized I was going to be held prisoner. I pulled a knife out of my belt and began swinging it at the guards. A Lakota Indian named Little Big Man pinned my arms. One of the soldiers put his bayonet blade into my back. I pulled myself away. Let me go. You have hurt me enough, I said. My dad came to sit with me, and I died shortly after. My parents buried me somewhere on the prairie, but did not tell anyone the spot of my grave. Who am I?
Lily?
You know me as Shidai, or the People's Princess. I was born on July 1st, 1961. I wanted to be a dancer, but I was too tall. My mom and dad wanted me to be a boy because I already had 2 sisters named Sarah and Jane. When I got into high school, I went to an all-girls school. I met my soon-to-be husband at the age of 16. He was 13 years older than me. I got married to him on July 29, 1981, at the age of 20. But there was a twist to this marriage. He was a prince. Later, I had 2 children named Prince William and Prince Harry. Prince William is 2 years older than Prince Harry. I was the most fashionable person in the world. I loved to wear hats. After I had Harry, I helped a lot of charities, villages, hospitals, and other places people were struggling. I spent time in Africa to do the Halo Trust. I died in Paris in a car crash. I died on August 31st, 1997. My funeral was September 6th, 1997. Who am I?
Nikki?
If you can dream it, you can do it. As a child, I grew up on a little farm in Marceline, Missouri. I was born on December 5th, 1901, in the upstairs bedroom of a 2-story house on North Tripp Avenue in Chicago. My mother, Flora, was a teacher, and my father, Elias, was a farmer. We had a horse named Charlie. I had 3 brothers and a sister, Herbert, Raymond, Roy, and Ruth. I also loved entertaining. I would do little skits with Roy. I got into art soon after that, and ever since I loved art. I would actually draw pictures for my barber, and he would give me free haircuts. As the years went by, I made films with my good friend, Russell Miles. During World War I drove an ambulance for the wounded. In August of 1923, I packed my bags for Hollywood, California, and stayed with an uncle. I turned to Roy to help me. Together we formed our first studio. I hired 3 men to help me with cameras and 3 women to draw and paint my cartoons. One was named Lillian Bounds. I didn't know if my cartoons were good enough, and I wanted to be the best in the business, so I got in touch with UBI Works. I convinced UB to join the studio. Together we created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons. Let me tell you, Oswald was a hit. The business was so good, Roy and I moved to bigger offices on Piper Avenue. Once we moved to the new office, we changed our studio name. Something horrible happened to me though. Charlie Mintz, the man that bought Oswald from me, hired most of my artists. I was so upset I couldn't eat or sleep. I knew I had to create a new character, an even better one than Oswald. I had an idea, but I kept it a secret. If you remember Lillian, well, I asked her on a date, and it was a good idea because on July 13th, 1925, we got married and later had 2 daughters, Diane Marie, and adopted my second daughter, Sharon May. Every night I told Lillian how my new character was coming along. I named it Mortimer, but she said that it was too fancy. So we changed it. At the time, he didn't look like the same character everyone knows today. He was skinny with stick legs and a sharp face. The old version was also mean and often showed the little guy playing tricks on other characters. Many of you know about Steamboat Willie, which the manager of the New York City Colony Theater agreed to show. Then the manager of Ocean Park Theater in California created a club where people could watch hours of episodes. Word of the club quickly spread across the country, but more trouble hit. The dishonest distributor wanted control of our character, but Roy worked out a deal so that we had ownership of him. Then the distributor hired UBI Works. I was so angry, I hired all new animators. Next came the Great Depression. We were doing fine though. I also learned about Technicolor. I could finally include color. My first cartoon in color was Flowers and Trees, which won an Academy Award. In 1933, I wanted to create a full-length animated film which we called Snow White. It took years to create, but finally premiered on December 21st, 1937. Sadly, my mother died before I wasn't able to see it. We went on to produce 3 more animated films. I got so much money from the films that I bought 51 acres of land for our newest studio. We also created some less popular films, like Treasure Island. After World War II and Pearl Harbor ended, I started to think about building my own little land, which opened on July 17, 1955. I grew old. Diane and Sharon were now married with their own children. I loved having grandchildren. To celebrate our 41st anniversary, Lillian and I took the whole family on a cruise to British Columbia, but I didn't feel too good. We found out that I had lung cancer. All that smoking I did caused it. I died on December 15, 1966, at 65 years old. Unfortunately, I didn't live to see the grand opening of my newest and greatest creation, but Roy made sure everything was perfect. Who am I?
Shannon?
I was born February 3rd, 1821 in Bristol, England. I moved to New York with my family when I was 11 years old. My father Samuel's business didn't do well, so we moved a lot. My father died in 1838 while we lived in Cincinnati. After that, I decided to go to medical school. I got denied 29 times because of my gender. Male doctors ignored me because of my gender. I studied with a doctor before being accepted to Geneva Medical College. I graduated in 1849. When I finally became a doctor, patients wouldn't come to me because I am female. And people criticized me and put me down because I am a woman doctor. In 1853, I finally established my own clinic in New York City. I named it the Dispensary for Poor Women and Children. In 1857, with the help of my sister, I established the New York Infirmary for Poor Women and Children. I also established schools with my mother and sister. In the late 1860s, I created a school to help women learn to become a doctor. Part of their education was about hygiene, because I believe hygiene is important to women's health. I have 8 brothers and sisters. 2 of my sisters opened a school. My sister Emily became a teacher. I was the first woman to graduate from medical school in the United States. My sister Emily was the 3rd woman to graduate from medical school. I wrote a few books and traveled around the world lecturing about education of women in medicine. While I was lecturing in Britain, I became the first woman to make it on the British Medical Register. Who am I?
Leandra?
I'm worth $33 billion
May 14th, 1984, in White Plains, New York. My dad is a dentist named Dr. Z, and my mom was a psychiatrist until she went to help my dad. I have 3 sisters, 1 older and 2 younger. When I was 12, I created a website called SuckNet. I went to high school in Exeter, New Hampshire, and then went off to Harvard University. During the time in Harvard, I created something very close to SuckNet, but better. It was called The Facebook. When The Facebook just came out, only Harvard students were allowed to use The Facebook. And 2 Harvard students claimed it was their idea. I agreed to pay them half of the money. By that time, I dropped out of Harvard to work on The Facebook. My sister used to work with me, but a couple years later, she quit. Yeah, she went to Google. Trader. In 2005, I changed The Facebook to just Facebook. In 2005, Facebook had 6 million users. The next year, I opened Facebook to all teens and adults. In 2008, I became the youngest self-made billionaire. In 2010, I was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Take that, sister. Also, I signed a giving pledge, which means to donate half of my wealth to charities. They made a movie on me called The Social Network. In 2012, I married Priscilla Chan, and Facebook had 1 billion users. Who am I?
Katya.
Do you know who made a painting that is possibly the most famous painting in the world? I did. Yet unlike many artists who are only good at art, I did so much more. I'm super competent now, meaning that I'm good at many things. I was an engineer, architect, painter, sculptor, mathematician, musician, analyst, inventor, botanist, writer, cartographer, geologist, and prankster. I was born on April 15, 1952 in Vinci, Italy during the Renaissance. My mother, Catherine, was a peasant, and my father, Sir Piero, was a businessman. Nobody knows their last names, and I also don't have a last name for these days. He took care of me for a few years and then gave me to my uncle and grandparents. The only family member who loved me was my uncle. He taught me how to love the natural world. Since my parents weren't married, I could never attend a university, be a lawyer, or a businessman. So at the age of 12, my father arranged it, so I went to an art studio in Florence to become an apprentice. My master's name was Verrocchio. During my time, artists often work together on projects, so I helped paint many portions of paintings. I helped paint the famous painting, Baptism of Christ. In it, I painted one of the angels. When Verrocchio saw my angel, he liked it so much, and he never again touched a paintbrush. Instead, he let me paint for him. At age 30, I moved to Milan, where I deeply knew the Verrocchio scores on them. He wanted someone to make weapons for him, and he hired me. I made anything he wanted, including huge stage sets, from planes to war machines, even though I was a pacifist. Duke Scores asked me to make a huge statue of a horse in memory of his father. I studied horses, and I even dissected some horses, so I can know horses inside and out. After 10 years, I finished the 24-foot tall clay model. I needed 80 tons of metal to complete the statue. In 1494, the French attacked Milan. Then the Duke used the metal put aside for the statue to make cannons. After it was finished, it was Milan. In 1499, they used the clay model for tar practice, so it was completely destroyed. On my deathbed, it was said that I was still talking about the failed horse. I was always trying new techniques.
invented on ones. Some of them worked really well, but not all of my techniques worked. I was told to make a painting for the dining hall in the monastery near the Duke's castle. I chose to make a painting of Jesus and his 12 disciples at the dinner table. It was called The Last Supper. It was completed in 1496. Less than 50 years after I finished it, it started to peel because I used a painting technique that didn't work. I also had a very hard time completing the projects I started. I loved the planning stages of the project, but sometimes finishing it was a little bit boring for me. Right now there are only 13 paintings that are now completed by me and 3 is not incomplete. I was one of the greatest artists of the Renaissance, but the other great names belong to Raphael and Michelangelo. Michelangelo and I disliked each other very much. Michelangelo even made fun of me because I never finished my horse statue. Seriously, how dare he? Then the battle of the artists began. We each had to make a painting of the battle for Florence and won. We both failed. I used another technique that didn't work, and Michelangelo never finished his painting. One of the reasons my art was so good is because I wanted to learn more about the human body. I dissected dead humans, even though I was not allowed to do it. I drew pictures of the inside of the human body in my notebooks, and my understanding of the body helped me to paint more realistic people. Yet I didn't only study them. I studied animals, plants, and nature. I wanted to understand how everything works, and I filled my notebooks with ideas, observations, and thoughts. Do you know that when I wrote in my notebooks, I wrote in reverse? This is called mirror writing. Do you think I did it because it was easier for me to write that way? Since I was left-handed, I wanted to keep my ideas a secret. Even though I dissected animals, I really loved them a lot. I actually thought they were more beautiful on the inside than people. I bet you would have never suspected I was a vegetarian. Most of you know me from my art, but I did so much more. I invented many machines and devices. You might think because I was always inventing that I was a serious person, but you would be wrong. I was also a prankster who played jokes on my friends, and a magician who entertained them. Also, I could tell people riddles such as this one. See if you can guess the answer. Many will have to take it out of their memories. The answer is an oven. As you can see, I have many different interesting talents. As I was getting close to 60 years old, my health started to fail, and I did not have much to show for my years. At this time, someone took me in just so that he could talk to me, and I could share my ideas with him because he thought I was a genius. This person was the King of France. I spent my remaining days with him until I died in the King's arms on May 2nd, 1519. My life may have not been very long, but it was very full and I accomplished a lot. As I once said, a beautiful body perishes, while a work of art does not. Even though I am gone, my work is still around. Hundreds of years after my death, my name is known. Can you guess it? Who am I?
Apple's first computer was sold for $666.66. In 1976 and by 1980, Apple was worth $1.2 billion. I had a girlfriend in high school named Kristen Brennan from 1972 to 1977, and we had a daughter, Lisa, which I did not have mine until she was 7. I named my first computer Delisa. In
1980, I went looking for my biological parent, mother, and found out I had a half-sister, Mona Simpson. On March 18, 1991, I married Lauren Powell, and we had 3 children together. In 1985, I was forced to resign from Apple, and I started my new company, Next, Inc., a hardware and software enterprise. I invested $5 million of my own into Pixar Animation Studios, which produced Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles, to name a few. In 2006, the studio merged with Walt Disney, making me Disney's largest shareholder. In 1996, Apple bought Next for $429 million, and the following year I returned to Apple as CEO, Chief Executive Officer. The Next computer is the basis for today's Mac OS X and iOS iPhone operating system. In 1998, after my return, I introduced the iMac, which sold for $1,299. On October 23, 2001, the first generation iPhone was sold for $400, and 100,000 were sold. In the U.S. before the end of 2001, on June 29, 1997, the first generation iPhone was introduced, and it was named the Invention of the Year. Eventually, Apple went on to introduce revolutionary products such as MacBook Air, iPod, iPhone, iPad, and iPod. In 2008, Apple introduced iTunes and iTunes Store. In 2003, I discovered I had a rare form of pancreatic cancer, and a year later I had surgery to have the tumor removed. Right before my surgery, I let all of my employees know about my tumor and the surgery I was about to have. At this time, I stepped away from my job as CEO of Apple to take care of my health issues. In January 14, 2009, I took another 6-month leave of absence to focus on my health again. In 2009, I was very private about my personal life and had a liver transplant, trying to keep it out of the press. I finally announced I was resigning as Apple's CEO for good on August 24, 2011. I died at 3 p.m. on October 5, 2011 at my home with my wife and kids by my side of respiratory complications from my pancreatic cancer. I have always said if there ever came a day when I had to no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come. At the time of my death, I was worth $2.2 billion in Apple stocks and in Disney Pixar stocks, $7 million. I sold most of my Apple stocks in 1985 when I first quit Apple. Who am I?
Lauren?
My writing career started when I was just 11. On May 27, 1907, I was born in Springdale, Pennsylvania. My parents are Robert and Maria. I am the youngest of 3 children. In 1929, I graduated from Pennsylvania College for Women. People were buzzing that I took zoology instead of English. And then in 1932, I graduated from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. I finally got my degree in zoology. After that, I got named editor-in-chief of the Fish and Wildlife Service. This was a big deal because people told me you can't be a scientist because you're a girl. Girls are supposed to be a mother, a cook, or a nurse. I didn't listen to them. I listened to what I wanted to do. In 1935, my father, Robert, died. A few years later, in 1937, my sister, Marion, died. I continued on until 1939 and retired as editor-in-chief at age 32. When I was older, I continued my concerns about pesticides that led me to write science my book, Silent Spring, anchored the chemical industry, so that started the environmental movement. My other books are The Sea Around Us, The Sense of Wonder, The Edge of the Sea, and Under the Sea. Then in 1957, I adopted Robert Chistey after his mother's death. In 1964, I was battling cancer, so I died at age 56 in Silver Spring, Maryland. Luann.
Sophia. I got a book published for $100,000. I was born in Gate, England, July 31st, 1965. When I was little, I lived in Chipping, Salisbury, close to Bristol. I have a little sister named Diane, nicknamed Di, and my parents, Anne, who died at the age of 42, and Peter, who is still alive. My nickname is Joe. Later, I got married. In my head, he was always at work. Then I had a child named Jessica. After Jessica was born, I got divorced. I love to read and write. I learned that I was so good by practice. And my idol was C. Lewis, the author of the Narnia books. When I was 6, I started recording my stories. In high school, I was shy, but I enjoyed middle school at Winding Comprehensive. I became head girl there. When a noblewoman came, I put on a record, so I didn't speak to them much. But unfortunately, the record was scratched, and that wasn't too good. So the deputy headmistress picked it. After college, my parents wanted for me to be a bilingual secretary, but I didn't become one. So after college, I went from one job to another, but I got fired because I couldn't pay attention. Then I went on a train once and got the idea of Harry Potter. I took a risk and got the first book of Harry Potter published. I got Harry Potter published in 1994, early in the year. One of my jobs was being a teacher in Oporto, Portugal. In Portugal, I loved window shopping. I remarried Dr. Londonderry and had 2 children, Mackenzie and David. My biggest accomplishment was raising my children. Who am I?
Colleen. I stayed in one small building with 7 people where we had to be quiet and couldn't go outside for 25 minutes. I was born in Frankfurt am Main, Germany on June 12, 1929. My parents and my older sister Margot made my family. My family was lucky. My dad had a job and my family had money when most people in Germany were out of work and were poor. Life was good for us until the first half of 1933. A man named Adolf Hitler and his party, the Nazis, were taking over, and they hated a large group of people, especially Jews. My family and I were Jews. To escape the Nazis, my dad found home and work in the Netherlands. In 1934, I moved to the Netherlands. When I was 10, World War II started. Then on May 10, 1940, our worst fear came true. The bombs, the sirens, the Nazis were invading the Netherlands. In just 5 days, the Dutch had surrendered. Law after law was made. We couldn't go to the beach or the cinema, we had to wear a yellow star, and we couldn't go to the same school as non-Jewish kids. I had to go to a Jewish-only school in 1941. Then my 13th birthday brought happiness. My father had gotten the gift I wanted, a red checker diary. I named my diary Kitty. I didn't know this would be very important in the near future. On July 5th, 1942, a letter arrived from Margot ordering her to report for labor services. Father told us to pack a rucksack with anything we couldn't leave behind. I couldn't say goodbye to my friends or bring my cat. The next day we left our house. As we walked, Father told me that we were hiding in the back building of his old office. We were joined by the family of father's business partner, the Van Pels, and a man named Mr. Freckle. There were rules we had to follow. We had to be as quiet as mice during the day. We couldn't go outside or send letters to friends. Life was hard in this place that we called the secret annex. Food was hard to get and fights were often. With news of the outside world, my diary, and my growing love for Peter Van Pels, it seemed like we would survive the war though. But all our luck ran out on August 12th, 1944. We had been hiding for almost 25 months. With guns, yelling, and heavy boots, the Nazis broke into the annex. We were arrested. After we left, some of our helpers went into the annex, and one of them, me, found my diary and locked it into a desk to save for me. We were put on a train to go to a transit camp called Luxembourg. Then on September 3rd, we were put in cattle cars that were going to a concentration camp in Poland called Auschwitz. Then we were separated from the men. Our heads were shaved and numbers were tattooed on our arms. On October 28th, Marco and I were separated from our mother and sent to a camp in Germany called Bergen-Belsen. There we both got typhus. We died sometime in March 1945. I was just 15 when I died. Sadly, the only one to survive the war from the secret annex was father. Me gave him my diary and he began to read it. People told him to publish it. So, in the summer of 1947, it was published in Dutch and then in English. Today, the diary is the second top non-fiction book read across the world. Who am I?
Logan? Do you know who is possibly the most famous pianist ever? I was born in 1770 in a place called Bonn, Germany. Let me tell you about my family. My mom and sister died when I was young, so I was left with my two brothers and my father. My dad was a good musician, but he was also an alcoholic. He started teaching me before I was even 4 years old. He was a harsh teacher, though. He would do things like grab my knuckles when I made a mistake. When I got older, he would have me up very late so he could show me off to his friends he brought from bars. By the time I was 12, I already had a job as an organist at court and was earning a salary after my dad couldn't take care of the family anymore. One year I went to Vienna. At age 16, I was noticed by Muster. Once I was arrested for acting suspiciously, but by then I was well known, and the officers didn't think I could have done what I did. I came back from Vienna when my father got sick. Eventually, my father died and I went back to Vienna, and after a while, my brothers came too. I never returned to Bonn. Some things I like to do are compose, produce, and perform music. I like to eat macaroni and cheese, red herrings, and mushy soup with bread and eggs. I like to drink strong coffee. Some of my achievements include becoming a hit in Vienna, writing 9 symphonies, and changing the world of music. I started to lose my hearing from lead poisoning in 1801. As my hearing got worse, I struggled to write music. I would stay up all night trying to write music. Sometimes I would dump a pitcher of water on my head to keep myself awake. I never married, but I was often dating, normally someone who was engaged or already married. Some interesting things about my music was my symphony had 5 parts, each with its own name. I died of liver failure on March 26, 1827, but my spirit lived on. Even aliens can hear my music, if they're lucky enough to find Voyager 2. It includes an excerpt from my 5th symphony. Who am I?
Elias Edwin Binney.
Did you know the average American child uses more than 700 crayons by the time he or she is 10 years old?
Lily Via Jacques Cousteau.
When we return wild animals to nature, we merely return them to what is already theirs. For man cannot give wild animals freedom. They can only take them away.
Jordan is Wilma.
Winning is great, sure. But if you're really going to do something in life, the secret is learning how to lose. If you can pick up after a crushing defeat and go on to win again, you are going to be a champion someday.
Drew is Bill Gates.
I do what I find interesting and challenging, and I think I have the best job in the world.
Olivia is Dr. Seuss.
Funny things are here, funny things are there, funny things are everywhere.
Aika is Maria Talshis.
Dance from your heart and love your music, and the audience will love you in return.
Dylan is Crazy Horse. It's a good day to
It's a good day to fight, a good day to die. Strong hearts, brave hearts to the front, weak hearts and cowards to the rear.
We're going to take a little break, and Aika's going to set herself up for a little ballet dance that she has to present to us.
Lily is Princess Diana.
I no longer want to live as someone else's idea of what and who I should be. I am going to be me.
Nick H is Walt Disney.
It's kind of fun to do the impossible.
Shannon is Elizabeth Blackwell.
The idea of winning a doctor's degree gradually assumed the aspect of a great moral struggle, and the moral fight possessed immense attraction for me.
Leandro is Mark Zuckerberg.
You don't get 500 million friends without making a few enemies.
Katya as Leonardo da Vinci.
I love those who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength in distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to strike, but they whose heart is borough in whose conscience approves their conduct will pursue their principles unto death.
Nicholas L. as Steve Jobs.
Being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying you've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me.
Lauren as Rachel Carson.
One way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I never seen it before? What if I never see it again?
Sophia as J.K. Rollins.
It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends.
Colleen as Anne Frank.
I don't think of all the misery, but the beauty that still remains.
Logan as Ludwig van Beethoven.
What you are a mistake by birth. What I am by myself. There are only thousands of princes, there is only one Beethoven.
The students have made a project to help us learn more about the person. Please take time to visit their tables and ask questions.
At the end of our evening, students will bring their projects to the library and set them up on the shelves. We will be presenting to third and fourth grade classes soon, so please bring back your costume for next week.
Please enjoy the rest of the night and thank you for coming.